Out is a half-hour series focusing on the LGBTQ community in Brandon, Manitoba, funded by the Community Radio Fund of Canada. The series shares the difficulties LGBTQ members have faced, the achievements and strides they have taken, and the support received from the community. We hope the stories shared will help those uncomfortable with any LGBTQ lifestyles understand the opposite point of view and become more sensitive to the struggles they face, as well as provide support and information for any LGBTQ members in the area.
Hi, my name is Jan Eck, and I am very proud to help bring to you Out, a new series highlighting the lives of LGBTQ citizens in Brandon, Manitoba. In this episode, we begin a two-part series focusing on some of the services available to LGBTQ students in Brandon's post-secondary institutions, Brandon University and Assiniboine Community College. In this first part, we will begin by presenting the ongoing work of the BU LGBTTQ collective. This is the second time around covering the collective for CJ 106. I previously visited them in 2012 for a feature in the Broadcast from Under the Big Sky series. You see, I am especially fond of this group, having been one of the founding members way back in 2004. I had visited the BUSU offices the autumn prior to that year as a newcomer to Brandon and as a prospective student to Brandon University. I was curious as to what services or events might be happening that I would be interested in checking out. When I posed the question to that BUSU rep that afternoon, the busy office all turned their heads to look at me, with smiles and a bit of surprise. Why no, came their response. They had no organizing group to represent the LGBT community on campus, but were very much looking to support such a group, and would I be willing to participate in creating one, with much help from BUSU along the way. I assured them that I would, and in 2004 we began work on the LGBT collective within the short-lived Equality Resource Center. By the autumn of 2004, we had organized a few dozen people to announce our presence via march to City Hall. But because many of our collective were new to Brandon, most of our efforts as a collective were less political and more about the importance of having social gathering spaces to meet. We would have bar nights at Suds, the student union drinking spot, no longer with us, that featured queer artists and DJs. We began the long-lasting fetish and fantasy social that, while becoming our signature event, started with the bizarre and controversial inspection by plainclothes detectives from the Brandon Police Department. You see, journalists at the Brandon Sun at that time had caught wind of our fantasy social, which was purposely kept low-key in lieu of the perceived atmosphere of the day. The journalists had made some very strong presumptions about our event, and was noted the day prior to the event in the Brandon Sun that they had contacted police to let them know of our event, and that they suspected drugs and bizarre activity. To their credit, the detectives quickly realized that there was nothing happening that was worth their presence and left. The collective and BUSU were appalled by the actions by the police department, who had public relations meet with us shortly afterwards, and an apology was made towards our group. The fetish and fantasy socials continued for many years without controversy that accompanied the premier event. They were great in that they garnered much interest from the general artistic and activist community, and there was a mixture of scenes, styles, and sexual orientations in a relaxed, unforced environment. More commonly, we held positive Space Week events, educative sit-ins, movie nights, basically anywhere or any reason to gather. The most pressing need of the LGBTQ student was social opportunities. In the years after I graduate, I would continue my interest in the collective, which had from the beginning always hurt from low active student participation. This is a problem for many of the groups on BU campus, and when I ask why, apathy is usually cited as the key reason. It is difficult to dedicate time to organizing events, and Brandon students coming from even smaller places in rural Manitoba may be uncomfortable with the spotlight that usually comes with organizing. Collective events and activities hit a low point during the BUSU office fire of 2012. I interviewed a depressed representative facing immense challenges when I came to do the story from Broadcast from Under the Big Sky. And while committed support from BUSU was never a doubt, the collective was always suffering from low student involvement. It almost seemed like it just might cease to be. Fast forward to 2016 as Stefan Irvin comes to the BU LGBTTQ collective, and bang, drag-themed events with big-name stars at Houston's? wine and cheese parties at trendy downtown cafes, a committed and vibrant online presence loaded with community and student information. The collective was back in a very big way. Stefan Irvin and I have mutual friends, and I have watched his efforts admirably. I don't really know how he finds the energy maintaining work, his studies, and his tireless activism. When I accepted the position to report for this series, I was both thankful for such a great story to tell and the opportunity to highlight the next level event organizing at the BU LGBTTQ Collective. The following interview took place at the Women's Collective office at the Knowles Douglas Building in August 2017. I'm right now sitting with Stefan Irvin, the LGBTQ offices at BUSU. So excited to talk to him about all the events that are happening at the BU LGBTTQ collective at Brandon University. So let's begin with your name and your position at the collective.
All right, so I'm Stefan Irvin. I'm the chairperson currently for the BU LGBTTQ collective.
Can we talk about your background and how you became involved in community activism?
Yeah, so I've been at the university since 2010. I kind of had my hand playing in some BUSU and some student politics when I first got to university. Taking a little bit of a break, went traveling for a year, just kind of saw the importance of queer communities and their place in cities and in rural areas, and kind of got inspired to go from there and kind of shifted my focus from student politics to kind of picking up more of LGBT focused activities in politics then.
Oh, that sounds exciting. So what cities were you in, and what places were especially inspiring?
Yeah, for sure. So I was in Australia for just shy of a year, and I wouldn't say there was necessarily any specific city or town along the way that really kind of showed me the importance, but it was just their general culture. You know, just even as a country, they speak of partners. They don't speak of who that partner is. So it's just those subtle, kind of qualities of the city and their lifestyle that I really wanted to start emulating here in Brandon.
So you've been at BU since 2010?
Yeah, with the exception of the year off to travel, I've been here since 2010.
Oh, what's your studies?
I started off with a degree working in sociology and recently switched over to going now into the third year of the psychiatric nursing program.
That's excellent. You're in your third year. Well, congratulations and good luck. Let's talk about the collective now. Starting with an overview, briefly, of activities, just a general overview.
Yeah, so we're just kind of trying to make any type of activity that maybe hasn't really been happening in the city in the last year or two, focusing just on spaces where people can be themselves, not focusing on what that looks like, but just a space where people can do and be how they please. So we've tried to be broad in doing some educational activities, but also having activities over casual wine and cheeses too, just trying to, break down some barriers and open up a bigger discussion of queer experiences here in Westman.
Is there a mission statement or a goal attached to the collective?
We do have a mission statement. I don't have it with me, but it's essentially, I would sum it up in just breaking down those barriers that we do experience and broadly trying to change the general culture and attitude towards queer people here in Westman, because I would say Westman and Brandon as a city is quite well. You don't really see those hardcore homophobic or queerphobic actions as usual anymore, but it's those subtleties that we need to start working on and those hidden views, and that's kind of our general focus of the collective, is working on that community.
So it's beyond the campus itself. It really stretches out to the whole region, almost, Westman.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the professors here, Dr. Corinne Mason, just summed it up really nicely. She went off about how we need to break down kind of that ivory tower status of the campus and work more on the town and gown type relationship, really establishing BU as a safe space for anybody to come and access resources that we do here have to offer.
Why is it important that this group is active?
It's really important that this group is active because queer people are here. I always say that gay rights and queer rights really aren't one in the city, because in the big cities like Vancouver, Toronto, Winnipeg, queer rights are largely already there. For me, queer rights are one in the rural areas. When you can roll into a mom and pop shop and that cute lesbian couple just gets treated like every other guest, then that we can say that we have, I feel, full access to civil rights and the right to safety to live authentically. And in places like Brandon, that's why it's important that we remain active.
I agree with you. I would think that I lived in major cities for the last few decades, and especially in Toronto and Montreal. Felt really good there as a queer person, and when I came back to Manitoba, it was obvious that this is where the frontline fight is, and for acceptance and tolerance of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. What kind of a group is it? We'd call it a non-profit group?
Yeah, I say we're unofficially a non-profit. So all of the events we do, never to make money, always to break even, and sometimes actually just take a loss. But we're student-run and volunteer-run, which I think is important. The folks putting on these events are just doing it out of the goodness of their heart, just because these events, like I said, do need to happen.
We'll get into this further, but your sponsorships have come a long way, so I'm sure that this is all improving in a fiscal way. Let's dig into the many events that you've been organizing with the last year, especially. Let's talk about some in the past and with the collective. I think the logical start would be at the beginning of the fall term, opening university, the queer orientation events of 2016. They were pretty exciting last year. They had a full week of scheduled activities. So let's talk about some of them.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of a general overview was the queer orientation last year was really our first kind of kick at the can, if you will, really trying to breathe some new life back into the collective here on campus and in the community. We started with a few educational events, but also just did fun things like giving away pizza, letting people know here on campus, that we are starting again, that we've always been here. It might have been a little bit more quiet in the past, but we're really trying to work on bringing it out to everyone here in the community. Queer orientation ended off with our drag bingo, Bud, Spud, and Steak dinner, which followed into the Be Queer social, which featured the Sunshine Girls, which have now changed their name to the Sunshine Bunch. And
They're from Winnipeg?
Yeah, they work out of a non-for-profit organization called the Sunshine House, and in there they have a program called Like That, which is just a space in the community where people, regardless of their gender, can come and just explore themselves, however that might look. And through that, they've got some really amazing drag queens that work on a really charitable basis.
Right, it's fundraising.
Yeah, so everything
Excellent.
they do goes back into the community. So we work closely with them and are going to continue to do so. And finishing that night, we brought in some top-line talent, a RuPaul drag queen, which for folks that, really idolize the drag culture, that's something really important. And that hasn't been done for a few years in Brandon, so it was really exciting.
Can you give a name?
Last year was Coco Montrese.
Okay.
This year, I can't officially say who we're bringing in because we're working on that contract, but I can confidently say we will have another RuPaul drag queen for this year's social as well.
That's a big name. Those are big names. How did you get those contacts?
Yeah, last year was a really interesting year. We did a lot of looking online, going down Reddit, looking for somebody that maybe posted a phone number or an email of somebody that maybe they shouldn't have, and just kind of taking a shot in the dark. And we emailed out, I think it was about 7 or 8 different people, and got back to us with various quotes. Some people said, this wasn't the right number, what have you. But it was a lot of, going down on our own search for these numbers, which was really scary but really exciting at the same time.
You didn't go through an agent or anything?
No, we were all self-done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so signing contracts and looking over riders for the first time was interesting.
And all these events took place at Houston's?
Yes, it did. We had some really interesting debates and conversations with people here in Brandon, and even going to ask resources in Winnipeg for their input as well, just because some folks have had really queerphobic experiences and incidences that were quite serious at Houston's. And ultimately we came up that, that kind of speaks to the bigger picture and bigger culture of Brandon.
Yes.
That, these incidences are a reality where we live. And instead of, trying to maybe hide or find safety in another space within Brandon, we could work on changing that space for the better, really trying to normalize these events and bring them to the forefront. If everyone else can access the nightclub safely, then queer people of Brandon should too. And if that has to start from us bringing the events there, and that slowly rolling into the bigger nights where maybe one day Houston's will plan their own events, or maybe they start taking some training, that those are good steps towards changing Brandon.
Absolutely. And there's no fear. That's
absolutely. And I mean, just as a business too, working with both us and ACC, they're so giving, realizing the financial stress that we are under and the limited budgets we work with. They are very giving in terms of the space, entertainment, and making sure that we can turn a small profit to hopefully go towards future events. The response we got in the first year's event was so heartwarming. I mean, people went out of their way to reach out to both the BU Queer Collective as well as ACCSA, to say say how much need there was and how well received it was by both the queer community but also the local allies, which right now in Westman are important to our fight.
Huge.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
want the culture.
Yeah, totally. They want to ride that rainbow bandwagon, which is awesome. I mean, their support doesn't go unnoticed. All in all, last year's queer orientation, a queer orientation being the first in Manitoba, it's really, really heartwarming to see that success and to only build on it this year.
Another big event was the Trans Day of Visibility. Now, I would like to contrast that first with the Trans Day of Remembrance. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the BU Queer Collective was only loosely involved with planning and helping with Trans Day of Remembrance, which for the folks that don't know is a day of remembrance for the people in the last 365 days of the year that we've lost due to their gender identity or expression. You know, you just take a moment to notice and reflect on the people that are no longer with us, just to really highlight that need of where as a community we still have work to do. And in contrast with that, we have the Trans Day of Visibility, which really focuses on the fact that trans people are thriving. You know, there's great success within the community, and we should also celebrate those as well. So while mourning the loss is important, you know, celebrating those successes are equally as important. So we wanted to make sure that in Brandon we put on an event for Trans Day of Visibility, and we did that through a documentary screening in the Elephant Room, which we did have a few community members out to, which was awesome.
The movie was called Free Cece. The Elephant Room was an excellent venue. What was the movie about?
So Free Cece is a documentary that was produced by Laverne Cox, who most folks know from Orange is the New Black. It follows Cece, somebody that was locked up and incarcerated in a male prison when they were visibly a transgendered woman, and just kind of talks about the structural violence and institutional violence that trans people face, more so in America, but we know that those unfortunately are experiences that trans people and trans inmates in Canada are experiencing. So we wanted to talk about Cece's process of appealing, and now she's a free woman. Yeah, it's a great documentary.
Those are great events, but also during the week on campus there's tabling. You do lots of tabling and education.
Last year we pulled away a little bit from kind of the tabling aspect, just in terms of not wanting to scare people off with education. You know, as terrible as that sounds, there's a definite noticed increase in attendance in our funner events that are more just come and be yourself rather than come and hear information. So we did more subtle, you know, information and tabling last year. So at every event, we always had safer sex supplies. We always had, you know, a few brochures on the different identities across the spectrum and information on different activities, especially in terms of sex, you know, maybe anal sex. I don't know if I can talk about that on the radio.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah, so like anal safer sex, you know, the things that maybe they don't teach you in high school, and making sure that those resources were available for folks to pick up, but definitely in a more of a discreet, not really purpose of the events last year.
And probably let people know about other resources that exist in Brandon too, like Brandon Pride and CIRC and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things we really focused on last year too, was CIRC has a really great list of Westman resources that are queer friendly, including doctors that, you know, that are trans friendly, and that's really important in this neck of the woods. So we want to feature those resources and make sure people know that we have those.
Is there anything else about last year's queer orientation?
Last year we were really thankful for the community sponsors that we had. They certainly weren't plentiful, I would say, but the ones that did come through are well-known community organizations like CIRC, like Smitten, like the now defunct Wildflower Cafe. Those businesses really did come through and ensure that we were able to put on these events, and we're really thankful to see, you know, hopefully over the years that those community sponsors will continue to flourish in any way that might look.
Oh, I think you really have seen the community respond positively, even on campus too. You don't need to, say, go to the library and presenting a safe space poster up there to let people know. I'm just walking through the campus and I'm noticing rainbow flags almost everywhere. Positive spaces, so it's come a long way. And the amount of sponsors, it's amazing. I'm sure it's picking up. Brandon Pride was chock full of new sponsors, and I see that you're active in talking to them. I think we have to realize that it's been difficult organizing because there's just very few people who have the time or the energy to dedicate to volunteering to help pull off these events and stuff. So largely this has been a one-person show. And yeah, I would imagine it's a very difficult thing to, in a busy schedule, going to school, to be able to set up a table.
Yeah, and you know, that's definitely, I would say, you know, right now, planning wise, I'm probably 90% of the collective.
Well, you have to prioritize your involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just recently also started working and being more involved with Brandon Pride. So, I'm not just planning these queer events, I'm also now starting to help plan in a small capacity the other kind of queer events in the city. So you have to be careful. Organizer burnout's definitely real. But this year, I'm really thankful that we're seeing more folks kind of be interested in what we're doing. I think this year is going to kind of be that year.
Washrooms on campus was a thing last year.
Yeah.
And it's growing.
And those gender neutral washrooms continue, to really stir up some arguments and some not so nice comments from folks. But I think it really starts to highlight, the true experience of what it's like to be queer in these parts. People maybe aren't really coming out of a place of total fear. I think a lot of people come from a place maybe of just general ignorance and not knowing, so maybe unfamiliarity. You're posing, a new concept to them, and fundamentally you're just asking for these changes because it makes people's experiences and lives safe. But some people still really have trouble to digest that. So yeah, right now one of the school administrators here at BU has dug their heels in on creating new gender neutral bathrooms, and it's really frustrating because the KDC board here on campus, they've already approved these bathrooms to go ahead, but then we have a school administrator who's digging their heels in for whatever reason, and it's just, creates a hierarchy that straight people or cis people, that their safety is more important than queer people on campus, and that our identities don't matter. But the collectives, just equally pushing back just as hard. We've rallied, we've written letters of support, and we're just waiting on the next KDC board meeting, which should happen in the coming weeks here, to kind of see what the verdict and the outcome of those bathrooms are, and we'll definitely follow up on that.
On Facebook, your picture actually says Queers Against Islamophobia, which is a very awesome statement to make because there's a lot of hate going around, specifically directed to people whose faith is Islam. So why is this important for you to publicize?
Yeah, it was kind of a response to everything from, Pulse at the time to current events happening in wars around the world, and this general assumption of a false belief of what Sharia law is and what Islam means to queer people. A person on Facebook that started the Queers Against Islamophobia Facebook trend, just to kind of bring that conversation, kind of what we're having now about, there are queer people that exist that do follow Islam, that their religion maybe isn't, as volatile as it is, both towards treatment of women and treatment of queer people, and just kind of tries to speak to the misinformation that flourishes on social media, that's really perpetuated, I would say, largely by the media and false representations of Islam. It's not something I know a lot of, but I feel it's something I know enough of just to use that small bit of privilege I do have to get people to listen and, hopefully change some views on what it is to be Islam.
In the bathroom issue, you mentioned it was more ignorance than fear. Do you think that is the similar case?
Yeah,
with Islamophobia?
There's definitely some flavors of racism in there as well. You combine that all together, but I really do largely feel it's false ideas and false beliefs of what these religions are. It's really, really sad that, even in today's society, that we're judging people on what they choose to believe. And when we're judging people on their beliefs, it's largely coming from, never even of reading passages from those holy texts. So how do you know truthfully what that religion says, other than a meme on Facebook or a meme on Twitter giving you these terrible, terrible views and ideas of what it means? And you don't just see that with, people's Islamophobia. You see that in all sorts of different types of racism and attitudes towards marginalized identities, even things like Black Lives Matter and their involvement with Toronto Pride. People's attitudes from that just, again, come from ignorance, I think.
Rape culture on campus. Is there anything you would like to say about that?
Yeah, it was huge last year. One of the bigger things I've ever got myself into, and I still look back on it not really realizing, how my involvement on campus got me involved in that. But it was something that was really, really special to be a part of, even as unfortunate of events as it was. I'm really happy with the outcomes thus far. Brandon University did some really terrible things, but once they were called out, they acknowledged what they did do wrong, and they worked tirelessly to enact a policy that was student-focused, student-put together, student-led, but also survivor-centered. So, this policy wasn't created created from a place trying to save face. It came from a place of really trying to be there for the person that did experience some sort of assault on campus, or even it goes as far to help them if they've experienced assault in their life as well. And it put measures into ensuring that we're properly reporting the current culture and environment of sexual assault. And yeah, it's been really, really great. And I'm only excited to see what's going to come of this new policy and sexual prevention officer that was hired here on campus.
Yeah, like I was saying, a lot of what I've been learning about advocacy of these issues have been occurring on Facebook, and I've been following the BU LGBTTQ collective on Facebook since it's had its page started. How important is a Facebook presence?
It's one of those things that are really hard. You can have a really good argument that Facebook protests or, the social media warrior, that they're not important, and that, for grassroots organizations, social media campaigns aren't, really beneficial. But I think when you're talking, really small grassroots levels, like places like Brandon, Facebook allows us to grow a small sense of community. You have a lot of people that interact with the Westman LGBT community Facebook page. And for them, that might be all of the queer community that they feel or right now we're able to experience. So when they see, those conversations that we try to lead and push on Facebook, I do feel that it's helping to change, even in the smallest way here in Brandon. So for us right now in our society, in our community of Westman, I think Facebook and social media does have a place. And largely, talking about the sexual assault scandal here at BU last year, that was led because of Facebook. Without that initial post on Facebook, we wouldn't have been able to distribute it as widely as we were able to. So for us, yeah, I would say it is important.
Mm-hmm. It's what we're doing today. Social media is paramount.
Yeah, a definite way of the future and how we're touching base with kind of some of the younger generation, so totally.
I would like to talk about the few partnerships and sponsorships. We've touched base on those, but I would just want to make sure that we've covered all the bases.
Yeah, totally. So one of the things that kind of all of the different queer organizations in Brandon are starting to realize is that we need to really make sure that we're not competing for each other's target audience, or that we're not creating events that are exhausting the community. We really need to start focusing on those community partnerships, working together, making sure that we're complementing each other and trying to more or less shuttle, what audience we're interacting with to each other's events to really start growing that community. So through events like Queer Orientation, we're focusing, on those local community businesses like the Double Decker, like Smitten. This year, I'm sure we could hopefully have places like the Lady of the Lake and different restaurants be involved in some fashion. That doesn't mean these businesses need to give in a large way, but they need to give in a way that shows us that, yes, they are here for queer people, changing things like bathrooms or change rooms in their businesses to gender neutrals. Those are things that local businesses have an easier time accomplishing because they're mom pa businesses. They're ran by people rather than corporations, and those changes don't go unnoticed. So we really want to make sure that we keep working with businesses and growing the sponsors that we have for all of our events to really highlight the organizations and businesses in Brandon that it's okay to be you in, and hopefully that'll change the wider culture in Westman.
Mm-hmm. The Cirque and Brandon Pride, obviously, huge resources to have.
It's really good to be able to, compare notes with what they've done in the past. Cirque and Brandon Pride have always been the constant. Year to year, they've really been pushing forward. They've been breaking boundaries themselves, trying to start more focusing on events outside of Brandon Pride, but also events through the whole year. So they've been able to share with us, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what they have been dreaming up of but haven't necessarily been able to accomplish. So kind of together, it's just everyone pooling together their resources, their success, and hopefully we can just continue to work together and continue to build a community.
Outside of those LGBTQ resources, there's campus resources as well. And when you work with ACC, is that the students' organization or ACC?
Yeah, ACC, right now we're with these queer events, we're partnered with the ACC Student Association.
Okay.
But in saying that, ACC as an institution responds well. There they had lots of faculty and senior administration come out to our queer event last year. You could tell that, they might have been a little bit out of their comfort zone, but they were there showing their support actively, whereas BU's administration, their presence definitely was, or the lack of presence, was definitely noticed.
Wow.
So this year, year, to combat that, we're going to officially invite senior administration to, explicitly request their presence, to really start to show face to the queer events and queer programming and queer campaigns that they're running and that are great on campus. But, to a certain extent, you can see that it's just a rainbow washing. So we want to hold them accountable this year.
That was Stefan Irvin, coordinator, BU LGBTTQ Collective. It has been a pleasure to bring to you this episode of Out. I have been your host, John Eck. Thank you for listening to CJ 106 FM.